The drowning death of Natalie would have been the ultimate tabloid celebrity mystery over the years. Was it an accident? Was it a crime? Was there negligence involved? Could Natalie would have been saved? We're still speculating on that in the media, tabloid and everywhere else, 39 years after the beloved Hollywood actress died off Santa Catalina Island while on a boat with actor-husband Robert Wagner and co-star Christopher Walken. The most told account is that Natalie, after drinking and an argument involving her, Wagner, and Walken went up on deck, it was alleged that she accidentally slipped and fell overboard. No one saw her go into the water, but did anyone hear her cries for help? At first, the answer was no, but different claims have emerged, including one woman, who said she heard a woman screaming for help for nearly 15 minutes that night, and tried in vain to get help. Many other versions of what happened that night have been told over the years. Then the story made headlines all over again more recently when law enforcement authorities reclassified the death as suspicious, and named Wagner, a person of interest based on a series of new interviews about the tragedy. But Wagner, now almost 90, has denied any involvement. And it seems likely the death of Natalie will remain what it always has been, a tragic mystery. A damn bloody shame. For Natalie and her family.
Damn. These cold cases are so frustrating. Just sends me crazy that these deaths are unsolved. And some pathetic loser has got away with murder. Well, here is the next cold case that may never be solved. We still see Bob Crane on TV reruns all the time as the wholesome, wisecracking star of the popular 60s sitcom Hogan's Heroes. But that all-American image hid a secret life filled with sordid sex acts involving many, many women. And the fact that Crane's salacious lifestyle was likely what got him killed has fueled media coverage and speculation about his murder ever since it happened in 1978. He was found dead in bed in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment where he'd been appearing in a theater production with his head bashed in by a blunt object, believed to have been a camera tripod, and an electric cord around his neck. Investigators at the crime scene found more video equipment and an extensive collection of Crane's X-rated videotapes of his sexcapades. This sounds very kinky. This bizarre juxtaposition between Crane's popular TV image and his dark real-life activities is what has made this cold case so particularly compelling for journalists like myself and so many others. To root for Colonel Hogan and then to find out about a second sordid life shocks and baffles people to this day, the actor's son, Bob Crane Jr., has said. Everybody has secrets, but his went public in a big way. One leading suspect, a man who Crane had been involved with in making the sex videotapes, was actually charged with his murder years later. But he was acquitted in 1994. Other possible suspects have been talked about, most of them because of Crane's sex-filled lifestyle. A movie starring Greg Kinnear and Willem Dafoe called Autofocus was even made about Bob Crane's murder case. But Bob Crane's mysterious killing remains unsolved, and will likely remain as Hollywood's most notorious celebrity cold case murder. As Sergeant Schultz would say, I know nothing.
Jimmy Hoffa. In 1975, labor leader Jimmy Hoffa disappeared on his way to a Detroit area restaurant. Hoffa was the president of the Teamsters Union during the 1950s and 1960s. He was last seen in the parking lot of the Machu's Red Fox restaurant. Hoffa became involved with organized crime from the early years of his Teamsters work, a connection that continued until his disappearance in 1975. He was convicted of jury tampering, attempted bribery, conspiracy, and mail and wire fraud in 1964 in two separate trials. He was imprisoned in 1967 and sentenced to 13 years. In mid-1971, he resigned as president of the union as part of a commutation agreement with U.S. President Richard Nixon, and was released later that year, but Hoffa was barred from union activities until 1980. Hoping to regain support and to return to IBT leadership, he unsuccessfully tried to overturn the order. Hoffa disappeared on July 30, 1975, after he had gone out to the meeting with Provenzano and Giacalone. The meeting was due to take place at 2 p.m. at the Machu's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, a Detroit suburb. The place was known to Hoffa, as it had been the site of the wedding reception of his son James. Hoffa wrote Giacalone's initials and the time and location of the meeting in his office calendar. Hoffa left his home at 1:15 p.m. Before heading to the restaurant, he stopped at the office of his close friend Louis Linteau, a former president of Teamsters Local 614, who now ran a limousine service. Linteau and Hoffa had been enemies early in their careers but eventually became friends. Between 2:15 and 2:30 p.m., an annoyed Hoffa called his wife from a payphone on a post in front of Damen Hardware, directly behind the Machu's Red Fox, and complained that Giacalone had not shown up and that he had been stood up. His wife told him she had not heard from anyone. He told her he would be home at 4 p.m. and to grill steaks for dinner. Several witnesses saw Hoffa standing by his car and pacing the restaurant's parking lot. Two men saw Hoffa, recognized him, and stopped to chat with him briefly and to shake his hand. One witness reported seeing Hoffa in the back of a maroon Lincoln or Mercury car with 3 other people. Hoffa had strong connections to the mafia, and several mobsters have claimed that he met a grisly end on their say-so. Although his body has never been found, authorities officially declared him dead on July 30, 1982. As recently as November 2006, the FBI dug up farmland in Michigan hoping to turn up a corpse. So far, no luck. Oh well, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Wait a minute, I hear you all saying that's not an unsolved cold case. We know who did it. Except it still has been classified as an open homicide investigation by the LAPD ever since O.J. Simpson was found not guilty on murder charges in 1995. O.J. Simpson was tried and acquitted on 2 counts of murder for the June 12, 1994, slashing deaths of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman. At 12:10 a.m. on June 13, 1994, Brown and Goldman were found stabbed to death outside her condominium in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. A reporter was sent to the crime scene in the Brentwood section of Los Angeles, then to O.J.'s mansion. The reporter called to say that the police had found blood on his property that might be connected to the murder. The reporter said O.J. might be a suspect. That's when it was realized, this could be big. Of course, it all exploded a few days later, when an entire nation watched spellbound as O.J. Simpson led police on the famous white Bronco chase along the freeways of Southern California. The pursuit was watched live by an estimated 95 million people. The pursuit, arrest, and trial were among the most widely publicized events in American history. It's more than a quarter of a century now since this all happened. This murder case has gotten more media coverage than any other in crime history. Simpson was represented by a high-profile defense team, also referred to as the Dream Team, which was initially led by Robert Shapiro and subsequently directed by Johnny Cochran. The team also included Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, Robert Kardashian, Sean Hulley, Carl Douglas, and Gerald Ullman. Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld were 2 additional attorneys who specialized in DNA evidence. Deputy District Attorneys Marcia Clark, William Hodgman and later Christopher Darden thought that they had a strong case against Simpson, but Cochran was able to convince the jury that there was reasonable doubt concerning the validity of the state's DNA evidence, which was a relatively new form of evidence in trials at that time. But the biggest unanswered question about this story, unless you believe O.J.'s original story about hunting for Nicole's real killer, is exactly what happened that night? Which set off the bloodbath killing of Nicole and Ron Goldman? The only person who knows that is the killer. And, unless he tells us before he dies, it will be one more real-life crime mystery that can never be solved.
The Torso Killer. In Cleveland, Ohio, during the 1930s, more than a dozen limbless torsos were found. Despite the efforts of famed crime fighter Elliot Ness, the torso killer was never found. The first two bodies, found in September 1935, were missing heads and had been horribly mutilated. Similar murders occurred during the next 3 years. The official number of murders attributed to the Cleveland torso murderer is 12, although recent research has shown there could have been as many as 20. The 12 known victims were killed between 1935 and 1938. Some investigators, including lead Cleveland detective Peter Merillo, believe that there may have been 13 or more victims in the Cleveland, Youngstown, and Pittsburgh areas between the 1920s and 1950s. Two strong candidates for addition to the initial list of those killed are the unknown victim nicknamed the Lady of the Lake, found on September 5, 1934, and Robert Robertson, found on July 22, 1950. Desperate to stop the killings, Ness ordered a raid on a rundown area known as Kingsbury's Run, where most of the victims were from. The place was torched, and hundreds of vagrants were taken into custody. After that, there were no more killings. The key suspect in the murders was Frank DeLazal, a vagrant who lived in the area. He was a known bully with a fiery temper. DeLazal was arrested and subsequently confessed, but his confession was full of inaccuracies. He died shortly thereafter under suspicious circumstances. How gruesome was this killer?